right, the first thing that I want to do before I get into anything, because I wish I would have thought about it when I did the first class. I want to give my phone number out for the people at the other centers. I want you guys, because I'm going to be doing this mornings, and I'm also doing the 9 o'clock class. So if you guys take my number down, you can text me questions, all right? And I'll probably look at them during the break, and then I will answer them at the 9 o'clock class. So my phone number is area code 330-388-5211. Just text me who you are and what center you're from and your question, all right? All right, because like I said before, if you were in the first class, not a lot of people talk about what I'm going to talk about. As a matter of fact, I've never heard it talked about behind the pulpit. It's what I talked about is really a lot in the scriptures, a lot that people don't seem to realize. So what I want to do is I want to kind of do a quick recap of what I talked about a little bit in the last class, and then we'll go on to other things. So we started out in Genesis 6:4, which says that the sons of God slept with the daughters of men, and that giant offspring were produced as a result. It says that they were considered men of renown, heroes of old. All right, and I talked about the two different theories that people believe of what the sons of God are and what the daughters of men are. The one theory is that the sons of God are considered the descendants of Seth, and the daughters of men are considered the descendants of Cain. And I really kind of just explained how that has no scriptural basis on any level. Just a couple examples was that, or simple example was the word daughters of men. That word men in the Hebrew is actually Adam. So that would have not Cain. So that doesn't fit the narrative that people want to say. Not only that, a regular human plus a regular human produces a regular human. That's like crazy science, right? So, and then I talked about the other theory, which is what I believe the scriptures teach, and I believe that I believe it to the point that it's beyond fact, which is that the sons of God are actually angels, and that the daughters of men were women. One of the big scriptures that I point to towards that is in Job 38, when God is talking to Job, and he's basically rebuking Job for everything that he's been talking about with everything that happened in his life. God says to Job, "Where were you when I created the foundations of the earth, and the sons of God were there rejoicing?" I kind of paraphrase, it's in Job 38. But basically, the sons of God were there when God created the earth, which means they were there before they created Adam, which would be in turn before Seth was born and before Cain was born. So if they were present before, then there's no way that they could have been descendants of Seth or descendants of Cain. They were there before. All right. And I wanted to touch up again on what we had talked when we went through this. Some big revelations that came to me that I found very significant, and some more that I wanted to add was that obviously, even though angels are considered celestial beings, celestial does not eliminate the fact that they are physical. You know, they're not like these ghostly figures that like phase in and out of reality, right? Which means they have a genetic structure, right? They have free will. You know, a lot of churches, and I used to think this for the longest time, we believed something, and I might not have this exactly accurate, but we used to believe something along the lines that angels were kind of like their time of free will had passed or something, and that they no longer, after Satan rebelled, they no longer had free will, or that they or something to that effect, which has no scriptural basis, but, or maybe it was just me that thought that for the longest time. But I felt like that's what I was kind of taught early on in my Christian walk. But here's something that this is what I thought was really cool or interesting. In order for humans and angels to produce offspring, they have to be genetically similar. Just like you can't produce a dog and a cat can't produce a dog and a cat hybrid, whatever that would be, a cog, right? Or a dat. But a lion and a tiger can reproduce, right? A horse and a donkey makes a mule, right? But here's something too that dawned on me after I taught this the last time, was that most of the time, I don't know what the percentage is, but most of the time, whenever a lion and a tiger reproduce, or a horse and a donkey make a mule, it may produce offspring, but most of the time, that offspring themselves are sterile. However, according to scriptures, these angel human hybrids were able to continue to reproduce afterwards. So that means they had to be really close to us genetically. Just to give you an idea of how close they'd have to be, an ape, like I think a chimpanzee, I think it was a chimpanzee as opposed to a gorilla. A chimpanzee, their DNA is 98% similar to humans. Yet you can't make a human chimp hybrid. Thank God. Right? So in order for an angel and a human, they have to be closer than 98%. I don't know what the percentage obviously would literally be, but I found that to be very interesting, very cool. You know, the nerd in me thought that was pretty cool. And then I also talked about how that the Nephilim, which is what they're called, or depending on how you want to term it, the Nephilim, one or the other, it's the same thing, just different pronunciation. Probably Nephilim is probably more accurate. But that God actually flooded the earth to wipe them out. A lot of people want to focus on the wickedness of the earth, which the earth was wicked, but the earth was wicked. The wickedness started because of the sin on the earth, but it really grew when the Nephilim came into the scene. All right. And not only that, I hypothesized how that if all of humanity's genetic structure changed because it was part angel, that Jesus would never have been able to come. Because the prophecy in Genesis 3 states basically that the Messiah was going to come through humanity. And if humanity's genetic structure was altered, that he wouldn't be able to, technically he wouldn't be able to come according to the prophecy. So God had to wipe them all out and start over with Noah so that what he said could still remain true. Because it said that Noah was perfect in his generations. I think it says he was a righteous man and that he walked with God, but that thing perfect in his generations means that his family line, his generations were pure. Stating that he was human. Not that he was the only human, only 100% human, but more than likely he may have been the only human that was that walked with God and righteous. Because as we read on, you find out that a lot of times these giants were revered as gods or demigods. Matter of fact, that term in Genesis 6:4, where it says heroes or men of renown, right? Heroes of old or whatever. A lot of people think, a lot of scholars believe that all of your mythology, all of your Greek mythology or your, whatever all those other ones, I'm really familiar with Greek mythology, but like your old Indian mythology or your Chinese mythology, a lot of these things came. They believe that that's what they're talking about. These men of renown or these heroes of old. That they were really talking about variations of these hybrid Nephilim that had spread out throughout the earth. And if you're familiar with any like Greek mythology or any of them at all, the stories do kind of sound similar, because basically these angels came from heaven, right, to earth, and they mated with human women. Well, a lot of these Greek mythology stories say the same thing. If anybody's familiar with Hercules, which is one of the most famous demigods, right? His father Zeus came from the heavens, Mount Olympus, to earth and mated with a woman. So there are a lot of similarities to some of these stories. And so a lot of scholars believe that that's what they're referring to when they say heroes of old, men of renown, and all that kind of stuff. Which I don't know about you, but that, for me, that was pretty neat, because it actually tells me that there's a chance that these characters were really real. You know what I mean? Like, Zeus might have been a real entity, but even though he might have been a real entity, he would have probably been a fallen angel. So I don't know. To me, that's kind of neat. I can see the look of excitement and interest on y'all's faces, but that's okay. That's pretty crazy. All right. I don't care what you think. All right. So, a couple other things. We talked about the Genesis 6:4. Once again, it says that they were there during the time of Noah, but then it also says and afterwards. And we talked about that word and afterwards is referring to after the flood. That these giants were walking the earth after the flood. I mentioned how we don't really know for sure how they came back. There's really two theories. One of the theories a lot of people believe is that the Nephilim gene passed on, maybe obviously not through Noah and not through his kids, but maybe they're one of their wives. But my problem with that theory, even though a lot of scholars do believe that, my problem with that theory is that I'll see if I can word it right. My problem with that theory is I just have a hard time believing that a dominant gene, such as the genetics of a whole nother species, can become recessive. If you understand recessive and dominant genes, it's hard for me, like say, just a simple, if a white person and a black person have a kid, the kid's going to be mixed. You're going to tell obviously that they're going to be darker than their parent, darker than the white parent, but lighter than the other parent. They're not going to have kids and all the offspring be really, really dark or really, really pale. You're going to see, it's not going to become like this thing, like all of a sudden, maybe like generations later, all of a sudden the other race pops up. And this isn't even race. This is a whole nother species, technically. All right. And so we go over the scriptures where they were there, all the different places in the Bible where they're mentioned, which mostly out of Deuteronomy chapter 2. We had the Amim and the Zazumim, the Amorite, and there was one more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but we reference those in Deuteronomy 2, and then we go back into Genesis because there was a war that took place that actually Abraham was somewhat a part of, where this one king, when it fought against all these giants, it says that he fought against the Rephaim. I think that was the other one, the Rephaim, the Zazumim. He says all this in Genesis. I want to say 17, but it may not be. Maybe, let me see here if I got it in my notes. 14, Genesis 14. All right, that this king fought against them, and if you're familiar with the story, Lot ends up being captured, and Abraham has to go in there and rescue Lot, and then within that story, you find out that they're fighting those giants in that part of the scriptures. Then we talk about King Og of Bashan, who was the king of giant. He was a giant and a king, and how his bed frame, right, was, I believe, roughly 13 feet long and like 7.5 feet wide. So we talked about all that, and I believe that's kind of like a summary of everything that we talked about. Yeah, I believe that's a summary of everything we talked about. All right, and so we're going to move on now. I want to talk about a few other things that I didn't mention that are related to the topic of the giants in the Old Testament before I talk about them being referenced in the New Testament. We also talked about Goliath, the story of David and Goliath, and we talked about Goliath's brothers later on. That's where we ended, was with the Goliath's brothers. But I wanted to comment on a few different things about Goliath to give you an idea of some things about how they were different, how things were different, like the things that they had were different. One of the examples, really the big example I wanted to talk about was the spear of Goliath. It says that the spearhead was 600 shekels, which which I had to Google I Googled, how much does 600 shekels weigh? And Google said that 600 shekels weighed 15 pounds. So the tip of this dude's spear was 15 pounds of iron. Iron. So you have to imagine, for a spear that's 15 pounds of iron, it would have to be the shaft or the stick or whatever you would call of it, the wooden part of it, would have to be pretty big and pretty thick to accommodate it. Matter of fact, if you read in there, if you read in the passages, pretty much every time there's some kind of giant referenced, it always says that the staff was like a weaver's beam. And I had to look that up. What a weaver's beam was. And it actually is exactly what it sounds like back in those days when they would weave, rugs or whatever, they would have the strings hang over this beam, and I guess it was super thick. And I actually believe that the term weaver, when it says it was as big as a weaver's beam, and this is my opinion right here, but I believe that it was referencing just kind of like a way to like a figure of speech to express how that it was the handle or the wooden part of it was really thick. I think it was a figure of speech, because literally every single time you read in the story about how about these giants, every single one of them said the spear was like a weaver's beam. I think when you read the stories later on of Goliath's brothers, every single time it was like their staff was like a weaver's beam. And I even found out later on in it's either 1 Chronicles or 2 Chronicles 11. One of Joab's relatives fought a giant from Egypt, and it says again his staff was like a weaver's beam. So there wasn't just giants in Israel. There was giants in Egypt too, which could very well mean the giants had scattered across the earth, which I thought was pretty neat. All right, so here, let me see here. Okay, apparently my notes are all jumbled up. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to read some scriptures in the New Testament that allude or talk about everything that we just mentioned in the Old Testament about these giants, these Nephilim, these angel-human hybrids, and why it could be very significant to today, more today than people really realize. All right? And once again, I'm going to throw it out there. If you've got questions, ask. Has anybody got any questions so far? All right, cool. That's okay. I do want to bring up something that I thought about later on. Cody had asked if the giants built the pyramids. You remember asking that? I thought about that, and I'm going to try to base everything on Scripture, or what I believe Scripture says or is teaches us about them. And I'm going to say I don't believe that they did, only because, like I said, these giants were revered as gods, or or they were looked at very highly, gods or demigods. So because of that, that means that they would have submitted to them in a sense. You know what I mean? They would have worshipped them, and I don't think that if they're being worshipped that they didn't have a servant heart. You know what I mean? I don't believe they had a servant heart trying to turn people to the Lord. You know what I mean? So I think that they would have, instead of serving, they would have rather have been served, and they would have probably, if that was the case, they would have probably forced regular humans to build the pyramids or some other way. All right, so let's go to Matthew chapter 24. All right. All right, so while you guys are going there, as in this passage, the disciples are asking Jesus, when are you going to set up your kingdom? When are you coming back? Right? And he says a whole bunch of different things, but what I want to jump to is verses 36 and 37. And it says, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." So what that's actually saying is that the day that around the time frame that Jesus comes back, it's going to be like or similar to the way it was when Noah was on the earth. So that means that tells me, that tells me that chances are either the giants or the Nephilim are going to come back, or something similar are going to appear, because it says it's going to be like the days of Noah. It doesn't say it's going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be like. So that means we very well may see giants coming back to earth, or something. All right. Does anybody got anything they want to comment on that, or anything of what they think about that? What do you think? I mean, we could be walking around, it could look like Lord of the Rings or something around here. Jacob said alien. It could look like that. They could make themselves. Maybe it could look like that.
If they were mostly eradicated, how do you suppose they'd come back?
Well, if Genesis 6:4, it says that they were there during the flood, and they were there after the flood. And then it says, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. So, to me, that means that some sons of God came into some more daughters of men. Possibly. That's one that we will get to the other theory that I have, but I want to walk you through the journey of what I think what it could be as well. It may not be, like I said, it may not be exactly the same. One of the things you got to remember, because we're going to start getting into some speculatory stuff, is that back in the days that the scriptures were written, they didn't have words that we have today. or they didn't even have Hebrew versions of the words or Greek versions of the words, right? So some of these prophetic visions that they had, they would have had to describe things the best way that they could with the language that they had, with the wording that they had, the vocabulary. There we go. So just bear that in mind as we go through the next couple of hours. All right. Now, I want you to turn with me to the book of Jude. And I just want to also, while you're going there, if you aren't watching this live stream and you end up having questions, you can still text me and ask me too. I just probably won't be able to answer it during class. But just remember that all your questions, I'm going to try to give you biblical answers. So if you text me on questions about the book of Enoch or the book of Jasher, I'm probably, I'm not going to really have an answer for those, because I want all the answers to come straight out of the Word of God, what we believe is the Word of God, all right? All right, so we're going to read Jude verses 6 and 7. And it says, "And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their abode, he reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day, as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar manner to these, having given themselves to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." This passage is talking about the sons of God in Genesis 6. What it's stating basically is that it says they left their domain, right? They left their position in the heavens and came after strange flesh. Which it was strange flesh to them because it was a different species. It wasn't, we were the strange flesh, really, in that sense. Okay? Has anybody got any questions or anything they want to throw in there? James, you got anything? Okay. All right, cool. Well, if you get something, just let me know. All right. What I want to do right now is I want you to look at that word. Actually, you could go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, so maybe just real quick, reminding people and myself too, angel doesn't always necessarily mean a heavenly messenger. Angel actually meant just a messenger. So sometimes when we read the word angelos, meaning messenger, even Paul talked about it. There was an angel that came and gave me a thorn in the flesh, right? But it doesn't say it was a heavenly messenger. Actually, in the reference, it was just a messenger of darkness, so an angel of darkness, right? Mm-hmm. So on top of all those things, we can look at that and look at that word, that is angelos, and it just means a messenger. So it could be a messenger of light, it could be a messenger of darkness, even in all those, the parallels and the concordance as well.
Sure. But I will say, I do believe that this is not referencing a godly angel. This is referencing a fallen angel, the fallen angels. Let me just throw this out there. This isn't in my notes, but do you think that all fallen angels fell because they wanted to team up with Satan? That's what we're taught, right? Do you think that all angels fell because they sided with Satan? A lot of people believe that. because the reason why I'm asking this is, and I'm not saying for sure that I have the complete answer on this. I've started to look it up a little bit. I don't have for sure, but the Bible talks about all these different fallen angels. Believe it or not, it talks about in Revelation, right? It talks about Apollyon, I believe, or Abaddon. I think it says in one translation it's Abaddon, and another translation it's Apollyon. So, does that, a lot of times we just clump all of that up. Satan, Lucifer, the serpent, Abaddon, Apollyon. We all clump it all up as Satan, or, as one person or one being. But it very well may not be. It could just be different angels that rebelled against God. Yeah, it says they left their first estate, which I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to talk about that. That word, it says they left their first. Let me just pull it up. It says here. It says they left their first estate, which my translation says own abode. All right, they left their own abode. That word abode in the Greek is a word I can't pronounce, but it starts with the letter O. What? Orke? Orke. All right. It is only used in Jude chapter 1 verses 6 and 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 2, and I want you guys to go there. All right. Chapter 5 verse 2. Actually, I'm going to start at verse 1. We're going to read 1 and 2. All right. I'll give you guys a second. 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 and 2. All right, it says, "For we know that if our earthly house, this tent is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." All right, before I read the next verse, what do you think he's saying there? What do you think he's talking about? For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, yes, he's talking about our earthly bodies. But he know that what he's saying is we know that if our earthly bodies get destroyed, basically, we have a heavenly body waiting for us. Sound right? Verse 2, "For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed about our habitation, which is from heaven." Okay? So, we on this earth, right? We are groaning. We are desiring for that heavenly body, right? You all look at me crazy. Do you not want a heavenly body? Okay. Just making sure. I don't know about you, but I'd love to have a body that has 0% body fat. Right? Doesn't get sick. And all whatever other things you think that comes with a supernatural body, right? We desire those things. We desire that. We long for that. There's old hymns that people used to sing. Talking about there is coming a day. You know what I'm saying? I know you know what I'm talking about. All right. So, but it's really I love how Paul parallels this or Paul and Jude really. It's really God, because God wrote the thing, all of it, put it together. But they're saying that heavenly body that we're desiring, those angels left, right? Because it says that they left their abode, which that word abode and habitation that I read, that's actually the same. That's actually the same word. It says we long for that habitation, we long for that body, that heavenly body. Whereas these fallen angels, they left their heaven. They left the heavens. They left their habitation, right? Their, how do I pronounce that word? Oike. They left their oike. Oh, really? Oike is where the word oikos. Oikos. I know the one you're talking about because it's right next to the keto ones that I get. Yes. So they left. So that what they actually did is the very opposite of what we're trying to do. And I don't know about you guys, but it like the more and more I started to understand it, like really showed me how fallible angels really can be. You know what I mean? Like, you know, a lot of times we view them as like flawless, not necessarily like God, but you know, we think that they're like that they're perfect, that they don't do anything wrong. They're just there to watch over you and protect you and guard you. You know, but you know, they did a lot of screwy stuff. It's crazy. But so these angels, they did literally the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're on an earthly body, we're in an earthly body, or we're on the earth longing to be in the heavens. They were in the heavenly realm, longing to be on this earth. How crazy is that? All right. Let's go back to Jude 6. I want to highlight another thing here. This was pretty neat. Okay, so let me get back there to Jude 6 and 7. All right, so I'm going to read it again. It says, "And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he had reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day, as Sodom and Gomorrah, and these cities around them in a similar manner, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." All right, I wanted to mention highlight that part where it says that they did it as that they reference what these angels did to what took place in Sodom and Gomorrah. All right. So what I want to do is I referenced it earlier too. I want to jump back to Genesis 14, and I want to read that story. Okay. And let me see here. Okay, so we're going to read verses 1, I believe, through 9. Genesis 14, verses 1 through 9. All right. And I'm going to try to pronounce these names, but chances are I'm going to only say the first letter of a lot of them. I'll do my best. It says, "And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Roich, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. They made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Barisha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Amim in Sheva, K. And the Horites in their mountain of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to in Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the countries of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazon Tamar. Okay, so before I read on, this king, the main king was Chedor Laomer. Man, Chedor Laomer, right? He made war with Sodom and Gomorrah and a bunch of other nations. And then it says after 14 years, apparently they had defeated them. After 14 years, it says that they went to war again with the Rephaim, which if you were in the class the last time I taught it, that was a name given to giants. The Zuzim in Ham, which is the Zazumim, that was referenced in Deuteronomy 2, and the Emim, which is also referenced in Deuteronomy 2. They're both of those tribes are referenced as they were as tall as the Anakim. They were as numerous and as tall as the Anakim, men of huge. They were big. They were giants. And then it says in verse 7, it says they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites, which I also told you the Amorites was another tribe of giants. And I don't have the exact verse, but God describes himself destroying them and saying that they were as tall as a cedar trees. I don't know if the Amalekites themselves had giants in the land, but obviously they joined sides. They joined with them. They were definitely on their side. Same thing with Sodom and Gomorrah. What I want to highlight on that, the reason why I read that. Oh, hold on. Let me go back. Let me read the next verse. Verse 8. And the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, went out, joined together in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Eliam, Tidal, king of nations, Amphrael, king of Shinar, and Aroich, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. So, the reason why I wanted to read that was because this tells you that Sodom and Gomorrah, they sided with the giants in Genesis 14. They were on their sides. I don't know the story as to why they sided with them, other than the fact that they sided with them. They tried to work alongside them to come against Chedor Laomer, right? So that means that they were familiar already with angels and humans interbreeding already. If you read the story of in Genesis later on, I believe it's in Genesis 18. Let me see here. Yeah, Genesis 19. I'm sorry. In Genesis 19 is when God judges Sodom and Gomorrah and destroys it. And when you read the story, a lot of people want to focus, or they want to try to make this focal point that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of homosexuality. All right? And I'm not trying to say that we know what the Bible teaches about homosexuality, but what I am telling you is that is not accurate, or at least fully accurate. God, these people of Sodom and Gomorrah, they weren't just trying to have sex with men. They were trying to have sex with angels. And they were aware of them. And this scripture proves that they were aware of angels and humans interbreeding. Now, granted, obviously it was a different kind, but either way, it was angels trying to have sex with, or humans trying to have sex with angels, and that was the reason why God destroyed them, because they wanted to affiliate themselves with Nephilim. And that's why Jude compares, that's why Jude even says in there, he says that the angels left their proper abode, right? And they went after strange flesh as Sodom and Gomorrah. They were comparing these angels that were having sex with humans as Sodom and Gomorrah, because Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just trying to have sex with men, they were trying to have sex with angels. Has anybody got anything? Any comments? Any questions? I'm still waiting. I don't think anybody from another center has said anything. Go ahead.
I don't want to jump in front of you, but are you circling around to where you think that this is going to happen again, like on the earth, where, as it says, like as it was in the time of Noah? I mean, I'm not trying to jump in front of you. If that's
No,
like
no. That's okay. It could, but that's. I don't think that's where I'm going. I'm going to go a different direction, I believe. Because I will say this much, as we read here, the angels that did, that at least initially did it, they were locked up. It says that they were changed, they were thrown into hell. They're in hell right now, right, chained up, awaiting judgment. So I don't know for sure if they would operate everything the exact same way to do the exact same thing, because I mean, they may, obviously some did to some degree after the flood. Which, let me throw this question out there. Pastor Matt said this to me, asked me this question. Let me just throw this question out there. Do you think that some angels are still falling periodically? Well, just think, in order, just like it says that after the flood, right? That these Nephilim came back after the flood. That would mean that maybe angels have fallen since then, since the initial fall that happened with the rebellion of Satan, led by Satan in heaven. Well, that's what my point is, that it very well could mean that angels are still periodically falling even to this day. They're not just falling. They didn't just only fall during the time of when Satan was on the earth. Because if that was the case, these other angels would have fallen with them back then. So, I get excited about this stuff. All right, we got, I really kind of want to go ahead and stop here. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to pick back up. I'm going to throw it out there again. If you've got questions, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, start back up at 9, and we're going to pick this up. If you got questions, yeah, I'll give you my number again. It's area code 330-388-5211. Text me your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them after the break. All right.